My name is Mike Stepner. I'm a member of the board for the Friends of Center Architecture and a long-time faculty member here at the school. And I want to welcome you to our program this morning. I think it's a very exciting and timely program, especially given that the discussion topic today was at the Land Use and Housing Committee on a Thursday. If you read your morning San Diego Union Tribune, it was reported on this morning in the business section. And it's timely because it really is talking about some things we need to do and we're doing in the city that this is who we are. And I think it's just a very interesting program. Let me read a few things before I turn it over to our speakers. In September of 2022, Mayor Todd Gloria convened a group of civic leaders to gather public input and present a vision for the revitalization of 6 city-owned blocks in and adjacent to the Civic Center. The committee, called the Civic Center Revitalization Committee, was charged with developing and evaluating ideas to identify socioeconomic needs and opportunities for the city, ensuring city staff can continue delivering world-class services to the people it serves, and shaping the parameters of what will be a transformative catalyst for civic core in downtown. Our speakers will be presenting the findings, the recommendations, and perhaps the next steps on what the committee has developed and where it all goes and when we get to go to the Civic Center. Our speakers are Jennifer Luce and Christopher Ackerman-Avila. I will introduce them in a minute. They will be presenting our findings, but I want to make some comments to set the stage because that's what I want to do. You get the mic, you can do whatever you want. But in January, the Voice of San Diego asked a question with the headline, New City Hall or New Civic Center? And I think that's a very important question because it really asks, what are we trying to do here with this project? Are we looking only at a new city administration building and affordable housing? Or are we looking at a new civic center, a new heart for San Diego? Also in January, the Regional Design Assistance Council, RDAC, sent a letter to the city in support of the Urban Manifesto that's part of the committee report. And it was being considered by the committee at that time in January. But they wrote, government centers and the public places within them represent the city's past, present, and future. Not every generation has an opportunity to create one. In the words of the manifesto, one in the committee report, we have one chance to get this right. A legacy project that is an opportunity to level up the city's economic, aesthetic, and social value. And then there's the saying in response to questions about why design matters in situations like this and cost. And the response is to lift our hearts and inspire us. And that's what this is all about. The thoughtful design of our Civic Center will make a strong statement about who we are as a community and how we value the structure of our society. And I think it's more than a building. Let me introduce our speakers. Jennifer Luce is a licensed architect practicing in California and New York. She received a Bachelor of Architecture from Carleton University in 1984. She established her multidisciplinary architectural practice, Luce Ed Studio, in 1990. In 1994, Jennifer earned her Master of Design Studies from Harvard University and is now a member of the Alumni Council and HAA Alumni Board. In 2016, the American Institute of Architects recognized Jennifer's outstanding contributions to the field and elevated her to the College of Fellows. The Luce Studio has completed projects for the San Diego Public Library, San Diego Museum of Art, a new Children's Museum, Museum of Contemporary Art, and most recently, a $55 million renovation expansion of the Bingay International Museum in Balboa Park. She serves on a variety of advisory boards and presently co-chairs both the AIA California Monterey Design Conference and the San Diego Civic Center Revitalization Citizens Committee. Christopher Ackerman-Avila is the policy advisor for Mayor Todd Gloria on matters related to land use and housing, parks and recreation, and libraries. He is the staff to the Civic Center Revitalization Committee, and he has a Master of Urban Planning degree from the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana with an emphasis in economic development and community development. And As I told him this morning, we never did have any classes together, but we are both alumni of that distinguished university. With that, I will turn it over to Chris, because I believe you're going to be the start. And we'll follow up after the presentations with Q&A.
All righty.
So you can.
Yes, I did. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. So if I could get a show of hands as to how many of you have been to the city administration building, those 6 blocks there. Yeah. So the pictures that I'm about to show you are going to be no surprise. Anybody that's been to the passport services? Very attractive. If you're trying to get a building permit at the Development Services Department, this is the entrance. This is how you are greeted. If you're trying to park to go to any of these buildings as well, this is the parking structure. Exactly, right? Something that we cannot capture in images is also the smell, for example. Couldn't get the flies here either. This is underground. So this is our underground central utility power plant area. Stuff that even the public usually does not get access to, but that we see every day. Continued. These are our pipes. Our water goes through there, so please do not refill your water bottles. Right? So this is clearly a problem, right? We see that in the interior and the exterior. This is not an inviting place to be in. This is not a place to be proud of. So in response, one more. Our steps are literally crumbling apart, right? And so to be clear, these are the 6 blocks that we're talking about, going as far north as the 101 Ash Street building, including the City Administration building, the San Diego Civic Theater, the Parkade, Golden Hall, the Civic Center Plaza, and the King Chavez High School, as well as that DSD building to the very left. So in response to all of these images that you've seen, the environment that you've seen in the Civic Center area, in mid-September, the mayor created the Civic Center Revitalization Committee, which, as Michael mentioned, was tasked with creating a vision for what these 6 blocks would look like. And we've been meeting since September on a bi-weekly basis. We produced our final report, which I'll get into shortly. And so the Civic Center Revitalization Committee was formed with these 22 members, several of which you may be familiar with. I'll just leave that here so you can take a look at who was involved. And the point of this was to have broad perspectives, broad backgrounds, whether that be Martha Gilmer from the San Diego Symphony, whether that be Jennifer Luce, of course, Dr. Ruhi Shabazz with San Diego City College, et cetera, right? So we can get all sort of different backgrounds and perspectives. And then, the entire committee was chaired by Jamie Bradford, and then we formed 4 different subgroups that would go deep into these specific topics. So Betsy Brennan chaired the Downtown Partnership, so she can get the downtown community's perspective. Julie Coker formed the tourism subgroup. Steve Cushman formed the economic development subgroup. And Jennifer Luce formed the Civic Center design subgroup. We met bi-weekly between September and January. We were Brown Act compliant, so that means that every single agenda item was open to the public for comment. There was non-agenda public comment as well. And so here's an example of some of the agenda items that we discussed. So we had our inaugural meeting was to have the state's Housing and Community Development Department come and speak on the Surplus Lands Act. We had the Civic Theater executive team come and present to us on their vision for the theater and their future. We also had Sandag and Hassan come and speak to us on the Central Mobility Hub as well as some lessons learned from past efforts. We had Marty Gloria join us as well. So after those meetings and all those subgroup meetings, we produced a final report in January, and we released it to the public. And at the end, I'll show you all the website where we have linked that. So So with that background, I'll turn it over to Jennifer Luce.
Thanks, Chris. Have to say it's been an amazing honor to be a part of this group, and I applaud the city for pulling us all together. Amazing minds. The discussions were so rich on Zoom bi-weekly that this is why we decided to create these subgroups that could dive deeper into specific subject matter. And it's been a fantastic experience. I think it's gone on for months, longer than we all imagined it would, but I think that's a really good thing because we are staying intensely involved in the development of this project. So it's great. I don't know many cities that will pull this kind of committee together early on. I was talking to Jennifer a little bit earlier that I believe that we have a voice at the beginning steps of this project. So we want to maintain that voice, guide the city, guide the teams that are brought forward. And so gathering you all here today is just so important because we are the collective voice for the future of the project. Our group, which we call the design group, but essentially it's design in the broader view of that word. It's the idea of making community, strengthening culture, and designing just about every aspect of the project itself. So our small subgroup included people in the arts, housing, green building, architecture, landscape, so many different avenues of research. So we really just came up with this word, like, what is San Diego's civicness? What's the future of our city, and how can we express that strongly at this very important heart of the city? So we, many of us decided to employ the process that we go through designing projects, which is to do a lot of historic research, precedent research, bringing forward inspirational imagery from around the world to really tell ourselves that we can do this, and we ought to be really excited about it. But how can we express that in the strongest way possible? Because this information is going to go through many avenues, many layers of communication, and we all know that sometimes the strength of that gets lost as it moves forward. So we decided to write a manifesto. And I know that seems like a somewhat political word, but for us it was, what is our true passionate belief about what this site should be for our city? So we wrote a manifesto for the heart of San Diego. And we hope that this format is a strong communication that will carry itself through all the way through construction. And so we all feel so passionate about this, and I know you do as well, being here today, that this is, and we say it, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for transformation. Who are we as San Diegans today and in the future? Very different place than we were in the 1960s when this site was developed. Our city is poised to embark on a once-in-a-lifetime transformation of the downtown civic core, giving us the proud heart and soul that we all deserve. A welcoming place of pride, dignity, that will serve our next generations long into the future. A new city hall will be at the cornerstone of the 5-block redevelopment for living and working. The time is now to carefully shape our goals and aspirations to create a remarkable place. And it's time to commit to those goals. So this is information that's being communicated now to City Council, to the Mayor. It's being embraced, and we want it to go to a broader audience. Now is the time for bold, audacious thinking, broad outreach, strong partnerships, and thoughtful planning to guarantee success. Now means it's time to remember how greatness is achieved. It's difficult, it's time-consuming, it's expensive, and it takes commitment. So we want to acknowledge how challenging this is going to be, and at least have everyone's expectations that this is going to be a difficult process. And difficult doesn't always mean negative, it means challenging. So we broke down the manifesto into this series of sub-themes. Celebrating democracy, that's what a civic center should do. Building trust between government and community. Honoring public service. We need to honor our city staff. I mean, Chris, I can't believe you have to work in those conditions. You shouldn't. We should be celebrating people like Chris to be a part of our city process. Demanding design excellence, and I know that's a very general term, but it's an important one. Embracing arts and culture. We have an opportunity for this part of the city to be the nexus of this amazing arts and culture expansion that we're seeing in the city. Create dynamic municipal synergies. Different aspects of our municipal government need to work together. Center the network. We really believe there should be a transportation hub as a part of this project. Listen. We need to listen to the public. And that's one of the reasons why Chris and I are kind of on the road right now, sharing as much as we can, which is something we did during our committee meetings as well. Address housing needs, clearly a priority. Commit to climate action. We have no choice on this. This is the future of our city, of our children, of our grandchildren. Ensure safety and inclusiveness. We want this site to feel welcoming to all. Take risks. Probably my favorite one, where we have to really step back and suspend disbelief and imagine the impossible. And shift paradigms, which connected to taking risks, it's shifting what you understand development to be, what you understand the civic core to be, and to think big. So we pull these three together. They're fairly clear, but a civic center isn't just City Hall. It's a civic place of gathering where conversation happens, where government happens, where they come together, community and government come together. And this includes public spaces, the City Hall, City Council chambers as the part of that whole process. So we gathered an appendix, and I think the appendix is available online as well, of hundreds, literally, of projects that we see as aspirational, because we need to inspire. And so these are just a few of those examples. This new City Hall for London, England, by Foster and Partners. Foster's just been hired to do the SDMA expansion, so it's a kind of a coincidental choice on this. But this idea of a building and a site expressing openness and welcoming and celebrating the democracy of a city. This is a City Hall proposal for a city in South Korea by Snoeta, really fantastic design group. It's 4 city blocks, it's expansive, it's open, it has a inspirational quality to it, and this is the kind of work that we want to see happen. Oops, sorry. And then just looking at California itself, the past of civicness and the future of civicness. The one on the left is the Marin County Civic Center by Frank Lloyd Wright. At its moment, it was progressive and innovative and expressed the California sense of government. On the right is Zaha Hadid's proposal for Elk Grove, quite different, quite modernist, quite forward-thinking. Where are we going to sit in that process? Hopefully at the forefront. Demanding design excellence, which obviously we as architects covet as an important part of civic life, but it doesn't come easily and it doesn't come automatically. We have to really push for it and articulate what it is in our minds makes design excellence. And this is something that I would love our community of design professionals to pull together to really identify and help guide the teams that end up being a part of this process. To earn an honored place in history, every aspect of design must celebrate our unique San Diego personality, legacy, and exceptional climate. The Civic Center must be an authentic expression of ourselves and our place. So, speaking of authenticity, this is the Opera House in Oslo by Snøhetta again. It's a building that is truly occupied from ground to roof and really expresses the personality of this city. And I think one of our favorite examples throughout our research was Lincoln Center and the transformation of Lincoln Center. Why it was established initially, how it has transformed itself over time, and the most recent shifts being so profound to take a brutalist past from 1960 and really begin to open it up, lighten it, make it transformational, and in that sense, inviting. This idea of welcoming, making social spaces, making civic spaces, places where people want to be, want to gather, and perhaps even be exposed for the first time to an opera, to a dance performance, or to a civic gathering, a protest, a festival, whatever it might be. Using public space to express the civic core, and particularly landscape to be a part of that language. This space is completely transformed today from what it was 10 years ago. And then gathering. I mean, we need this kind of space in our city. We don't have public squares. We need this civic space to express ourselves. And then intimacy, the intimacy of public spaces where we can gather in a smaller scale. And we always love Paley Pocket Park in New York City, a former site of a nightclub, demolished and given back to the city as a special place for gathering. Embracing arts and culture. I mean, we are at an incredible moment in our city where arts and culture are being celebrated, expanded upon. Philanthropy is making incredible contribution to our cultural life. And this project ought to be the next link in that sort of necklace of wonderful projects. The San Diego Symphony is under major renovation right now. We have the Rady Shell, we have Balboa Park, we have Bingay, which I'm really proud to be a part of. We have SDMA expanding itself. How can this project play a role in being at the forefront of communicating arts and culture? So we made a series of really strong recommendations, and one of them is to rehabilitate or rebuild the Civic Theater within this project. It's critical. There are so many people employed by the Civic Theater. There are so many people who enjoy performances, opera and Broadway. And there are no other theaters in our city that have the capacity to do either of those things. So we really feel it's a very, very important part of this project. Examples of that, Walt Disney Hall, really transforming a part of Los Angeles and becoming a nexus for cultural activity. It's a bold audacious building design. It's an incredible experience within, and it's touted as one of the top halls in the country. It does so much on so many levels, and we ought to be as aspirational. And we are. The Rady Shell is an incredible project. I have the pleasure of being a very close friend to Katie McDonald, who really formulated the strategy around this project and how we could make public-private space coexist. And so this is an inspirational project for us. Millennium Park in Chicago, which is, really a combination of art museum, performing arts venue, park, civic space, and the infusion of art, which we also feel is really, really important. And speaking of art, this idea that art can actually create a sense of civicness. This work, which I think we're all familiar with at LACMA, is not only a spatial art form, but it has become the iconic image of downtown Los Angeles. It is the most Instagrammed image in the city. This one's more complicated. Create dynamic municipal synergies. And I think as design professionals, it's something we know how to do. We know how to collaborate. And we want this project to encourage that because there are so many layers of complication to its development. So we need to encourage communication between departments. And then centering the network. We really, really believe this is an opportunity for the city to have a transportation hub. I think there was an article in the New York Times, was it yesterday, about Penn Station, Central Station in New York, how all of these hubs are now having a second life, or there's a question of whether they have a second life, but this is our chance to make a first life for some kind of transportation hub. How do you bring all those complicated synergies together? We've made a recommendation that we need to have a master plan for the project. And that will be the guiding light for all of us to be involved, for the public, for the design teams, for the developers. We need that information of aspirational desire on paper. And so we really feel strongly about that. In terms of transportation, inspirationally, the Oculus at the World Trade Center, very complicated project with so many entities involved, but the result is really quite remarkable. So we made the recommendation to include a hub for public transportation on the site of the Civic Center, to create an equitable access to the site, to make our city more sustainable, and to allow the increase in housing density to provide transportation for those people who come to live here. We had this great presentation by Sandag, and this is a very, very rough diagram that they pulled together over a period of time to talk about how the transportation hub idea could work. 2 levels below grade and then a project above it. Listen, invest in community outreach. Well, our committee is already at the beginning of that, but we want it to continue. We want constant communication with community. And that is really one of the primary ways we can build trust in the process and use all of the wonderful resources of the amazing minds we have in the city towards a better result. And I just bring up our project not because, whatever, but Our project was very complicated. We were affecting a historic building, we were working in a historic park, we were dealing with a museum that was humble and small and became big and bold. And the only way this project was successful was through communication. We constantly were reaching out to visitors, board members, city officials, and people in the park. And we never, in one instance, had a negative comment in a public forum. And I think it's because you tell the story carefully and you constantly communicate through trust. And then the second to last manifesto is addressing housing scarcity, of course, committing to climate action, critical, and ensuring safety, diversity, and inclusiveness, meaningful. We are in this really difficult moment. It's incredibly challenging. There was quite a discussion on an item at the Housing Committee meeting on Thursday. This project is, I don't know, maybe 10 years out in terms of being completed. It's not going to solve all the problems, but it should be at the forefront of innovating around them. In our appendix, we have dozens of housing projects around the country and around the world that we look at as inspirational to how we can play a role in this responsibility. And this is a recent project in Los Angeles. It's 35 affordable units, downtown Los Angeles. It's an incredibly inclusive and inviting project. It won a big AIA award for design, and on top of that, it's making a great social impact. So our next recommendation is to consider local and regional plans, i.e. this isn't a site on its own, it needs to be part of a bigger plan to maximize housing opportunities located appropriately throughout the downtown core. So this project has to collaborate with the rest of the city. And there needs to be a diversity of housing options, so there's a whole list. And we need to invest in our wellness and our future. And we look to the Transit Center in San Francisco as a great example of a project that is transportation oriented and contributes to the green life of our city. And then finally, take risks and shift paradigms. Bold civic leadership is essential to any large-scale development success. Aspirations must be clearly articulated. Excellence takes time, dedication, and a commitment to bravery. We looked at many cities and how they have transformed themselves in a profound way, and it's always through the bravery of civic leadership. Central Park being one of those amazing examples. And then, of course, our own Balboa Park. Reading the history of how it was established is quite remarkable. And then add the layer of inviting the 1915 World Exposition to be a part of San Diego when San Diego lost the bid to San Francisco and said, what the heck, we're going to do it anyway. Such courage and commitment. And the High Line in New York, which has completely transformed a whole side of Manhattan and created this unbelievable civic space for wandering. So, in conclusion, in the spirit of great civic endeavors of San Diego's past, and we have them, we have the examples here, we're inspired by the visionary tenacity of those civic leaders to imagine the impossible and think beyond the moment to a legacy for the future. Our new Civic Center must epitomize San Diego as a city of science, the arts, audacious courage by national and regional cooperation. Our recommendation is more than what the project looks like, and that was really important to say because it's not about aesthetics or one that states which buildings to tear down, but an urgent call for holistic design in the broader sense. We have one chance to get this right. A legacy project that is an opportunity to level up the city's economic, aesthetic, and societal value. Our leaders must engage the community, think big, to develop a civic center that will serve our city for now and for the future. So, this is just one part, one subgroup of our larger committee. And I think in the end, because we are designers and arts and culture thinkers, it was our job to really try to inspire a different way of looking at this project. And we want to continue that drive towards the impossible. And we need your help to encourage that and to talk about it a lot. So we're really, really excited to get to present it to you today and hope to bring you along as members of our support group.
So, yeah, some more slides. So, yeah, this is great though. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jennifer. A couple more slides. Just wanted to share as well some public comments. We will receive public comments on every item that we discussed in the committee. Some of the overarching topics that we received was the need for strong project labor agreements, whether that be for the Civic Theater and the entire construction of it. Learning from the pandemic and understanding that the future of work, maybe it'll be hybrid, the importance of online meetings, working from home, remote services, and hybrid work and shared workspaces, right? Absolutely the Civic Theater and the importance of it and preserving it, right? And then of course, partnering with small and emerging developers for any and all portions of the project. Those are some of the biggest takeaways that we received from the public comment portion throughout the committee. And then if you're interested in learning more, we created a website. At the very top, there's a link. You have the opportunity to sign up to receive email updates. I send periodic updates in terms of when we're going to Limestone Housing Committee, when we're going to the full committee, any sort of milestones to keep you informed. You can see all the public comments that we received. Periodically, we'll receive feedback from the community and they request to be made public. So I uploaded it to that website right there. You can view the reports. So I mentioned the final report, but every single subgroup created their own report and appendices and questionnaires, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see that in that link. Additionally, every single meeting was recorded. You can go through them at your own pace. Every meeting agenda is posted as well. And for any presentations that we received, for example, here at the Civic Theater, presentation from their executive team, you can also see that as well. So it's completely transparent so that you can take a look at the conversations. Feel free to email us your feedback, and we're always happy to receive that. And then in terms of next steps, as you may have seen on the news, on Thursday, we went to the Land Use and Housing Committee and we received approval to go to City Council to release that notice of availability, which will officially kick off that process. We're looking at April 25th for the full City Council hearing, and then releasing the actual NOA to the public in early May. That'll kick off a 60-day process where 60 days at least, we can expand that time to receive those proposals. And at that point, we will be reconvening the committee to review those proposals, get feedback. So this is absolutely the earliest stage. Your input is very crucial in this process. So we'll be continuing the conversation for sure. There we go.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, a lot of detail about a very important subject. I want to ask Chris a question first. Did you get those slides out of my garage? When I worked in that building, it was the same situation as this. And nothing has changed. It's just a historical note that the Onions and Orchids Award started with the Civic Center. As the Onion, the first Onion. Because we have a long history of perhaps not really thinking about some of the things that were raised in the presentation this morning. And I will have questions. I just want to start out with perhaps a question of Jennifer and Chris. Civicness. I would like to just talk a little bit more about it. I want to make an editorial comment first that I think that the approach with the manifesto that they presented from the Civic Center is not a one-off thing. It's the way we should look at all public projects, whether it's something as big as the Civic Center, as small as a neighborhood park, a bridge, a fire station, whatever it is. It's more than a building, it's a part of the urban fabric and a contribution to the community. And I think that's what you're talking about. So if you could just say how you, again, repeat how you got to the term civicness, because I think I'm going to use that term over and over.
We tried to think of how we could relate it to the idea of truthiness, but civicness seemed to make sense. I think we really sat down as a subgroup the first meeting and said, okay, what's the core goal of what we're doing? And it's to provide an identity for us, to provide a sense of what is it that makes this space, this place special versus another. You know, and I grew up in Montreal, which has hundreds and hundreds of years of history, and the civicness grew over time, and it's there. It's like infused under the skin of everything, and our city is young, and how do we have this chance to build that civicness, to define it ourselves. So having conversations about what does this place mean to each of us can help build the definition of civicness, because it's not the same here versus New York versus Boston. It's a very unique thing, and we have this wonderful opportunity to express it.
Any questions from the audience?
As somebody who grew up here in San Diego, graduated from Crawford High School in 1968, went to Europe shortly thereafter and discovered what we didn't have in San Diego, which is what Jane Jacobs called exuberant diversity, which I think ties into your idea of civicness. It's where a community comes together and it's lively and it's public spaces that are heavily used and have a lot of activity. It had a business here in downtown San Diego for a long time and a chance to kind of contribute to the changes that we saw in San Diego. In fact, right across the street at 12th and F in 1968 was Modern Equipment and Furnishings, where we delivered furniture into Southeast San Diego. That's how I made my money to go to Europe for the first time. But in this project, I'm glad you're emphasizing the public spaces, because the city is emphasizing so much new housing. I don't see enough emphasis on creating the great public spaces, even as we're doing that. We need those public spaces. With this particular one, I think you can create a great corridor. You have from the south end, from the convention center and ballpark through the gas lamp, you can get to this location and continue on. If you do something well, you can continue on up to Little Italy. So I would urge you to see this corridor of liveliness that you can create.
I love that word, corridor.
And specifically, I think one of the great models where you see that happening a lot is the Plaza Mayor, as they call it, in a lot of Spanish cities and colonial locations. The Plaza Mayor, as they say in Madrid, is a fantastic urban form that creates a public space where the community comes together. And I just as an urban form to put at the center of this thing, I would urge you to look at the Plaza Mayor type of model where people are coming in and going out from there. It says the heart of the city. The Plaza Mayor would be a great
Fantastic.
urban form.
Yeah, we'll add that to the appendix of research.
I was, had occasion to go out to the county, thing out there on Overland, and they did a really good job. They left the administration kind of downtown or some things, but they moved everything basically out there, all the permitting. And I wonder if the city shouldn't consider leaving the space where it is now as a civic theater and more park area and entertainment and things, like maybe a museum or art center, and move the guts of the business out somewhere, Kearney Mesa or somewhere like that.
That's a great question, and so one of the many things that we're doing as we lead up to this project is we're doing an analysis with JLL of all of our workspace needs here in downtown, our existing office and workers, and asking that question: who needs to be in downtown, and who can we move to other parts of the city?
Because parking downtown is terrible, and if you want to do permits or you want to do some kind of city business or thing,
Yeah.
move
And
around.
so the building permit department, DSD, is exactly one of those that we're thinking about having the majority of workers be in the Kearney Mesa site, and just having, because we want to consolidate. Right now, our offices are spread out not only in these 6 blocks, but we're also paying $7.3 million in rent for like 5 other offices across downtown, and that's not efficient. So we're trying to consolidate into 1 block, see what workers we can have in downtown, which ones we can send to others, satellite locations like the county is doing, and then having these 5 blocks for exactly what you're mentioning: public open spaces, affordable housing, etc.
There is an issue though. The planning department, which was supposed to be in the gas and electric building, is doing a series of trailers out in the middle of nowhere. And going back to the quality of the space, and one of the goals was to make sure that public workers had a good space to work in. Having worked in the building for 27 years, a building that was called the City Administration Building, we said a lot about how we think about our cities and our government, the title. And people need to be where people are. And while the campus that the county did out in Kearney Mesa is a beautiful campus, it's also in the middle of nowhere as well. And so we really need to think about how, not only what is the most efficient space, but what is the most effective place to be for people to be the most productive in whatever they do. I just need to go on a rant.
I don't think it's downtown.
Bill?
Yeah, I respectfully disagree, because I think it's important to think about, this is an anchor, downtown's role in the region. And I'm concerned our downtown's evolving into a bedroom community for the region's economy. And strong cities have strong cores. And the use of transit, for example, trying to encourage more people to access employment by transit or services, is driven more by where the jobs are located near transit more than where the housing is located near transit. Because people who use transit take it to their employment. There are few sectors in our region's economy that's focused on downtown. I hope IQHQ was successful at the waterfront. But besides, lower wage tourism jobs, government and the private sector services that support government is a really important component of downtown's image or function as a regional employment center. So, anyway, I would just consider that when looking at that question.
For some of us who aren't real familiar with all the steps involved in city government and committees and notices, can you speak to kind of what the next steps really mean? The notice of availability. How do you get from this concept here to teams doing construction drawings and design stuff? Is this kind of doing a kind of the master plan as the next step, and then that gets broken up into separate projects and separate developers, or how do you kind of put more meat on the bones and move forward?
Yeah, so I'll refer to this slide here. This notice of availability is really just the administrative work. The notice of availability is a 2-page sheet that says these parcels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are available. We are accepting proposals. It's a request for proposal, essentially. And once we get approval from the City Council on the 25th, we will release it in early May, and then there's 60 days. 60 days for teams to gather, whether it's, and these are teams. These are affordable housing developers, these are architects, these are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? They have 60 days to create their proposal and submit it to the city. We can choose to expand that time another 30 days, for example, to create really good quality proposals. And then once we receive those proposals, we have a 90-day good faith negotiation period, which is where our committee will come in. And we're going to be meeting with each of the proposals, each of the bidders and their teams. These will be public meetings, so everyone here is welcome to attend, and providing that feedback. This is what the proposal looks like. This does not mean civicness, this means civicness, so that we can really get that sort of public feedback, right? And that'll be 90 days. And then at 90 days, we're gonna start narrowing down the teams, and ultimately selecting one, well, potentially a combination, but we'll see once we get there. Selecting who will get the ability to develop these 5 blocks.
Let's go with Ross, then,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, let me hit you off.
Yeah.
Ross and then Frank,
Thanks, Mike.
and then here, and then,
I love the paradigm shift concept. And it's clear that the old paradigm centered on the need for parking and a civic theater as well as an office. I grew up with stories of downtown development, and I'm interested, Jennifer, in knowing how the work that you've done with the Mingay has enabled you or taught you more about listening and acquiring input from the broadest swath of the community. I have a feeling that it was a learning experience.
Truly for me, because historically our studio has done private projects. So this was really the first public one that we approached. But what was interesting is in some ways we approached it similarly to our private in that we have conversation, deep level of conversation with everyone. And I am now, I think, obsessed with the idea of working in the public realm because it affects and communicates with a broader audience. But that carries with it a responsibility to listen to everyone's needs and to try to coalesce an idea around everyone, all people, as opposed to a very specific group. But I think, as I mentioned, the only way it was successful for us was to create a really strong narrative that you carried with you through every meeting. It's a story. We are storytellers as makers. And we need to have a strong story about what this project is and what the intent of it is. And with that, I think that we can gain support as long as the story is strong and meaningful to many, right? It has to be meaningful to many.
Thank you.
Frank?
Yeah, so my observation, if I understand what you're saying, is that there's no way that in 60 days you're going to get proposals that even begin to address the kind of stuff that Jennifer's talking about. And the second part of that is, where's the master plan and all of that? So what do we do about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, multiple things. So we are meeting to, work on that master plan. That was one of the recommendations from Jennifer's subgroup. So we're meeting to begin working on that. And then as for the 60 days, it's not like the proposals are getting crafted on day one of it being released. The conversations have been held since July of last year. So it's not just those 60 days, there's been previous work done, but we can't speak to the work that teams are working on.
But you're gonna ask developers to look at these parcels and come back with proposals that I assume financially and hopefully design-wise address all the stuff that you guys have been talking about. And they're gonna do that in 2 months?
The
It's
work
just
has been continuous,
crazy.
so yeah, people have been looking at what we're doing, the work that the committee's been doing since we started meeting in September. So,
Well, but they're not gonna really have an invitation to participate until this comes out. And so if you're saying that, you know, that everybody's already got their ideas developed and done a ton of work on what this is gonna be, and that's happening even before the notice of availability is coming out, then I doubt that. And I don't think, I mean, I'm talking about a proposal that meets all the, you know, really high quality discussions and objectives and aspirational goals that Jennifer was talking about. That's gonna take a long time, and it's gonna take really quality people thinking about that for a long time once this comes out. And I guess I just like to know, it sounds to me like we're just doing what San Diego always does, I hate to be a cynic, but just jump into a conclusion on something, you know, without, I mean, that was very aspirational stuff that Jennifer's talking about. I just don't believe what you're saying.
Let me go back here, and then here, and then you. Yes.
So I have two questions. One is, how is this going to be paid for? Because a levy on taxes or bonds or something that usually will get voted down, or there's a high possibility for that. And then the other question is, we have so many great design minds in San Diego. Are there any provisions to keep it in San Diego? We saw a lot of like world-renowned architects that are European or New York based, or kind of are there provisions to keep it local?
So in terms of how you pay for it, so we have 6 blocks, the entirety of it. We have an option to either sell or lease the 5 blocks that we are discussing, that were the eastern portion of it. The money that we can generate from that will help finance the city administration building, which is just a 1 block. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's for that. In terms of keeping it local, there are no provisions, but again, these are teams of several different entities that are involved in this. So, you know, in terms of any, for the Civic Theater, for example, you know, you need to partner with somebody that really knows how to rehabilitate or just reconstruct a civic theater, and that requires expertise. So I'm not sure that we would want to limit it like that. We want to make sure that we're getting the greatest talent that is delivering the best result, the best product.
Chris, could you just talk a little bit about how the timing of the administration site works with NOA?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question, and I don't want to go too much into the timeline, just but there will be parallel processes. The city administration building will be the process that everyone's familiar with in terms of potentially being a public-private partnership, a request for proposals, the way that just essentially every project is done. On a parallel timeline will be that process that I described, and they're communicating with each other. These projects have to be communicating with each other, and that'll be a requirement.
All right, we got a question back there. Bald-headed gentleman. Well, go ahead. There's a person sitting next to you that raised his hand. Oh, okay. Then we'll go to,
Right?
yeah.
I couldn't agree more with Jennifer's presentation about that this project should be authentic to San Diego and really capture those things that really are important to make a great urban space in the city. But unless the RFPs are structured properly, I think you're gonna have a whole bunch of different developers not knowing exactly what to do. So I think it's really important the way you frame this whole RFP, because you have the Civic Center, the 5 blocks, and then you have the City Hall. Those need to work together. They're not 2 different things, they're one thing. So I'm curious to kind of know how is the city positioning that RFP in order to capture all these great things that Jennifer's talking about into one single powerful idea, rather than a bunch of pieces of objects and buildings? They're two different things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you have thoughts about that. But we are working on this master plan for the entire 6 blocks, right? So we're working on that. In terms of, I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
Well, I obviously think that's essential to have the master plan, and I think it should be now. I mean, we need that guiding document, even to review the NOA responses. I mean, there are a lot of people in this room, Frank, who are experts at master plans. I'm not sure how long you think one takes to pull together as a team.
Well, I guess, there's if you're gonna get people, I guess, from, that are gonna come in, and you're gonna get designers and developers from outside of this process, and you are, hopefully, it's gonna take a lot of thinking to really, first of all, understand. I know you guys have done this too, and you can present your findings and such, but I would imagine the 2 months could easily be the amount of time that a really high-quality design and development team would spend just trying to understand the situation, and particularly when it has to address, economic goals and, development deals, and not to mention the fact that this needs to be exactly what you're saying, a vision for the city. I completely agree with what Ray is saying too, I don't know, but I don't off the top of my head have a time frame, but I just don't believe that the goals that you guys are setting, which I absolutely agree with, and totally agree with what Ray just said, really takes a lot.
So the 2 months are just the initial proposal. Remember that there's also the 3 months after that, and then after that there's a 2-year period where you really start getting into those details. This is a multi-year process.
But the people are gonna come in with a proposal.
Which will change. 2 months, and then the 3-month period changes, and then there's 2 years after that.
Where are you gonna select somebody?
Probably a year from now.
Based on being integrated into a process where they're asked to submit some kind of proposal and then resubmit and change, and so there'll be a whole group of people that are
Correct.
that are competing over a year
Correct.
based on an initial 2-month proposal.
Correct. So
Okay,
it depends.
that might be.
I see that.
Go ahead.
All right, so I think to Frank's point, one of the things I'm noticing is around the financing. So if you're putting these 5 blocks up with notice of availability, the financing for the affordable piece, if there's not a big piece coming from the city, it's gonna come out of the sales price. That's what I'm saying, right? And so I think in that article that you mentioned earlier, I think London Mader estimated that the value of these 5 blocks would be about $120 million before you have to account for the cost of the affordable. And the $120 million presumably is what your envision would go towards the civic space and this public good. So I think, the reason I say this is related to Frank's comment is I think there is a history in San Diego of putting things out for an RFP and hoping that the private value created is enough to fund the public good. And I think whether that's SDSU West or it's River Park, or not River Park, but Midway or whatever, you end up getting something for the public, but it's not going to meet, I think, these goals and these values that you stated. That's the risk, I think.
If I can offer just one or two things, I once had a mayor that I worked for that used to say that it's cheap at twice the price if we're getting what we want out of the project. And I think that's what we have to think about. I would offer that the process, you had to change the paradigm and take risks as two of your points in there. I think that's the way the process should work. To me, the first step is before we allow any development team to put a pencil on a piece of paper bring them in and talk about the 7 values. And how do they see that as applying to the project? And then you can go back and the ones that give you the best impressions can go back and start doing their calcs and proposals. I think we have to start with that and not with how much is building gonna cost and when can you build it? So, back.
So, if homelessness is kind of the main crisis we've got now in the city, and I can see, I mean, we saw some of the housing pieces in this plan. Is there any thought to making sure that crisis is solved or done or addressed at the same time or before this gets funded, gets started building, that kind of thing, some tie-in that says, hey, we've got this, we want this, and they tied it all together to solve this crisis before we get to this, big civic core, which is great.
Yeah, so, one of the recommendations that we received, I think from many of the subgroups was, so in addition to the 25% minimum requirement that needs to be affordable below 80% of AMI, we also learned from when HCD came to speak to us that we have some flexibility on how we measure housing affordability. So we discussed the potential to need SROs housing, right? We discussed the potential to also include moderate income housing as well, because we're building very little of that too. So we have flexibility in how we measure that. And so we're looking at the Civic Center area as an opportunity to build that kind of housing, the most deeply affordable housing. And we're not just done there. On Thursday, we also took another separate item, a companion item, if you will, that would explore the old Central Library and the Homelessness Response Center. That indoor skydiving facility to also be redeveloped. And those 2 sites are also going to be deeply affordable housing, if not potentially 100% affordable housing. So we're really taking a multi-pronged approach. The homelessness situation is very difficult. There are 1,700 homeless people here in downtown alone. So we're hoping that these three different projects will help seriously address that issue.
Bill Anderson, the next slide.
Fourth and B building came down and the decrepit old California theater is due to come down. Do you stay in touch with, those are 2 separate developers, do you stay in touch with anything like that to see if by any chance could be complementary with your visions? Or?
Great question. So it's a little difficult with the California theater and the sort of legal issues that they're having there. But in terms of, for example, the parking lot that is northeast of the properties that we're talking about, in terms of the California theater, etc. In some ways, yes, there's conversations, not only just like looking at the parcels, but then also looking at other agencies like San Diego Unified School District, right? So there's definitely lots of agencies, properties, and conversations. We as a city wouldn't necessarily go out and purchase these properties, but a potential bidder might have that idea.
Yeah, just want to reiterate what Frank was saying, having, many of us participated in these RFPs, and the development teams, one, you're going to have multiple developers because of the different product types that are being developed. They have to go through their own decision-making process. Their boards are going to be, or their executives are going to be asking some very pointed questions, like, what type of construction are you saying we're going to do? Some affordable housing, type 1 high-rise construction, which is very expensive. What's the underground infrastructure expected? Is there going to be a mobility hub that we have to deliver and coordinate? And are we going to be expected to pay for that, or is there other money coming in? Public space that's been talked about. The civic theater, which is typically something that would need to be subsidized in part. And so with all these different components, if they don't get good answers on, this is the expectation, what you're supposed to pay for, and what we as the public are going to pay for, they are going to assume the worst case and reduce, they're gonna expect a higher rate of return because of the risk. They're gonna or offer less for the property because of the inherent risk. So if you can solve some of these questions, resolve them, and provide a little bit more guidance before you go to RFP, you'll get much stronger, better, more serious proposals from the development community.
I think the concepts are great. I mean, the city hall now is just so insignificant. Most people, when they come to town, think it's all building. You know, the county building, everybody knows. This one, hardly anybody knows. My concern is about the central mobility hub. All right, we can talk about that for a minute. I watched Hassan's presentation, and what you have now on the slide is totally different redesign from what they had in his presentation. He was coming in from Santa Fe Depot. Now, they've got the Luce corner totally restructured. It's coming down First Street. So this would have to be a subway, which he talked about. He talked about $2 or $3 billion to do this underground central mobility hub that you're looking at. I don't know where does it become a subway? You know, I mean, obviously you don't want to go all the way from Old Town Station to become subway, but someplace you have to move over to First Street to go underground. This is not happening in a vacuum, because LoSan is not staying just at Santa Fe Depot. NCTD is opening the convention center station in 2026. So somehow you're going to have to get back down and leave this with another subway. So is that another $1 billion to get down to, and State Rail Plan says Amtrak and NC Coaster plan to go to National City long term. So we're not doing this in a vacuum. This is not light rail. This is not with the Federal Transit Administration. I know Hassan built a lot of LA's light rail underground. Now you're switching to Federal Railroad Administration, different animal, heavy rail. And right now, where LoSan comes, this is a federal right-of-way. I don't know, have you guys talked to the feds about this? Have you really been in communication with NCTD, who's in charge of this corridor at this point in time? And so I'd say just, where is this route gonna go? How are you gonna go down First Street and then make a hard turn to be back between First and Fifth, where the new rail station is gonna open in a couple of years? Looks like they got a transit leak, which I'm assuming is extension of high-speed rail, which previously was coming into Old Town because you couldn't get into Santa Fe Depot. So it looks like it's coming down 2nd Street. I don't even know if that was included in the cost. And then he's got the airport rail coming in down D Street, which is at the higher level. So I'm looking at the whole impact on the broader part of the city, not just your 6 blocks, and you're affecting that. So can you speak to it at all, or is that still so nebulous you don't know?
Well, I think for our purposes of thinking about the Civic Center site, this notion that we could have a transportation hub as a part of the life of the project was curious, and clearly Hassan made a rather general presentation. I know that they're looking at a number of possible sites, but it feels like an aspiration we should at least investigate, and perhaps Sanday comes up with a number of options. I think this one which was prepared by a specific team was really a high level, can we even think about doing this?
Except your manifesto said it must happen.
A transportation must happen in our viewpoint. I don't know what that looks like, but something offering transportation to the Civic Center makes sense to us.
Oh yeah, and I will add, so Hassan's presentation to us, which most likely was a modified version from whatever you saw, included the Civic Center area, but they also looked at Santa Fe Depot. They look at the Port of San Diego stop up north as well. So they presented different concepts. And that's the thing is that when you're so early on in the conversations, there are a lot of unanswered questions. But it's that sort of conversation that you're having early on in this time. When you're right, we do have to talk to the FHA. You have to talk to all these other agencies. But this is early on, just a concept, just the thought that there needs to be a mobility hub, potentially the central mobility hub. But the importance of having this civic center area be a center for transportation. Up in the air. But you're right, we don't have all the answers.
And our hope is that competing teams address it as a high recommendation. We're not allowed to mandate it, but they need to really consider it, is what we're saying.
Chris, I guess I think thinking of all the questions people are asking, it seems like you're really speeding along where you shouldn't be. You need a master plan before you send up the notice of availability. Otherwise, as Frank said, the developers don't really have a sense of what exactly you want. And you're just going to get a lot of great ideas with nothing, no commitments connected. In other words, if you select a developer in a year, likely there will all be changed because by then you will have had this master plan. So I don't understand why the city is rushing to issue this when you should do a master plan first. Explain why. What is the urgency to issue this? Notice of the availability.
I wouldn't say that we're rushing. We started off this public engagement process in September, and then in January we released our initial public report. We continue these conversations. We've been going to dozens and dozens of meetings, getting feedback.
You have nothing to get the developers to start with. It's all just talk and ideas and suggestions, but there's no real 1 to 10 priorities to put into the project. And the worst thing I think is just a lot of these say we'd like to have the civic center, but it's not required. So we spent that took 40 years to build in 1966, and the concept that you're issuing is just sort of if you'd like to do it, fine, but there's no requirement, and you're stuck with this requirement for affordable housing but nothing else. So I don't understand why. I don't think you've done all these discussions in public and private, but there really is no hard and fast set of requirements that have been issued that take any of these things that Jennifer talks about into consideration.
One last question back there.
Yeah, I was actually gonna kind of hit on that same point because it's like any other project that any of us have started with. If you don't have a strong concept and the client says, I want this, I want that, I want this, and then they say, and I have a contractor ready to build it, but you're the architect. So now it becomes a design build project because you didn't have enough time to come up with the research, you didn't, check out the site, you didn't do all the steps that we all do. And you can break it down to like a single family home, custom residence. And if you still have, let's say, the couple is your client, and they haven't even agreed on the finances, now you're an architect coming in saying, okay, the owner doesn't know where the money's coming from. They have a contractor that's ready to build it next week, and now they just contacted me to design it. So it seems like all the pieces are kind of rushed, like you were saying. And granted, you're saying it started last September, and that's awesome. I think we're at a really cool point that I even found out and came to this. I'm super excited. But I thought we were at the very beginning. And I thought, okay, we're gonna get a master plan. We're all probably gonna see the master plan develop and evolve together. And then it's gonna go to the developers because otherwise the developers are gonna end up designing the master plan.
And we are very early in the stages. There will be no shovels in the ground until like 2027.
No, but I mean, even to me, the RFP is a shovel in the ground. Like I think kind of like what a lot of people are saying. To me, the RFP is like number one, and you can't get to number one without a master plan. That's kind of what
May I just dovetail on the lady in the front row's question regarding the California Theater Block? We have the 32-story AIDA project in process, and the potential for a Paseo corridor, like the gentleman said, from the campus at Horton Plaza. Is there any discussion of how the group would
prefer to see the development of the adjacent properties.
Could you repeat the question?
How would this core group envision what will be developed on the east-facing properties that the Civic Center Plaza opens toward?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I cannot speak for what proposals are gonna be submitted, I'm not even.
Well, I think the aspiration of the manifestos is that this project needs to connect to the surrounding sites and the city itself. So there need to be porous openings and places where you're urged to enter and be a part of a civic place, no question.
But there's a 32-story high-rise on the 4th and B corner in process.
It's in process, and why can't it speak to the site across the street is the question.
Two-way street, is what you're saying, everybody's got to look at it.
Yeah.
That goes back to the importance of some sort of master plan. It shows how all these pieces really fit together and you get more bang for your buck out of it. I'm gonna close with just an admonition from Socrates.
Oh, look at that.
Add to the manifesto. By far, the greatest and most admirable form of wisdom is that needed to plan and beautify cities and human communities. And I think that's what the manifesto is about, and that's the way we need to look at all public projects and the relationship to the private projects as well. In any city, but in this city in particular. It's not about let's make a deal. And I want to thank Jennifer and Christopher for the presentation. I think it was great. We all have next steps. We all need to be involved in continuing discussions to make sure we get what we really want as a city. I want to thank them by two books. And the book is, whose city is it? Who is the city for? It's by Blair Kamen, the former architecture critic for the Chicago Tribune. And it asks questions about who the city is for. And these are the questions that this project is asking, has to ask, as well as many of the other projects that we're proposing in the region.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.